I didn't invite my stepmom to my wedding. She showed up anyway and caused a scene. Now she's broke and wants my money. I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but recent events have left me feeling overwhelmed and conflicted. My name is Ethan, 28M, and I've been grappling with a complex family situation that has finally reached a breaking point. To fully understand the gravity of what's happening, I need to take you back to the beginning. When I was just 5 years old, my parents' marriage fell apart. My mom, Sarah, 52F, discovered that my dad, Mike, 54M, had been having an affair with his coworker, Diane, 50F. The revelation shattered our family, and the divorce that followed was bitter and contentious. I remember the day Mom found out about the affair. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, and we were supposed to go to the park as a family. I was excited, sitting on the living room floor with my favorite toy truck, waiting for Dad to come home from work. But when he walked through the door, Mom confronted him with a stack of emails she had found. Their voices grew louder, and I retreated to my room, confused and scared. In the aftermath of the divorce, a custody battle ensued. Despite her deep love for me, Mom was struggling financially. She had been a stay-at-home parent for years and was now working as a waitress, barely making ends meet. Dad, on the other hand, had a stable job as a software engineer and could provide a more comfortable lifestyle. The court awarded him primary custody, with Mom getting visitation rights every other weekend and some holidays. The transition was hard. I went from seeing Mom every day to only a few days a month. Those first few weekends with her were filled with tears, both hers and mine. She'd hold me tight and promise that things would get better, that we'd always be close no matter what. Dad moved us into a new house across town, and Diane moved in shortly after. I was 7 when they got married in a small ceremony in our backyard. I remember standing there in an itchy suit, watching as they exchanged vows, feeling like my world had been turned upside down once again. Growing up in this new family dynamic was challenging. Diane tried hard to step into a motherly role, but her efforts often felt forced and overwhelming. She'd buy me expensive toys and plan elaborate outings, seemingly trying to outdo the simple but meaningful time I spent with Mom. There was this one time when I was 9, and Mom had promised to take me fishing, something we'd been planning for weeks. But Diane found out and suddenly insisted on a trip to Disneyland the same weekend. Dad sided with her, and I ended up missing out on that special time with Mom. Despite living with Dad and Diane, I always felt a stronger connection to Mom. Our time together was precious and filled with genuine love and understanding. She might not have been able to afford fancy gifts, but she gave me her undivided attention. We'd spend hours talking, playing board games, or just taking walks in the park. She taught me to cook, helped me with my homework, and always made me feel heard and valued. As I grew older, navigating family events became increasingly tricky. My mom's side of the family, especially my grandparents, never fully accepted the situation. They were civil when necessary but kept their distance from Dad and Diane. I remember my 13th birthday party. The tension in the air was palpable as both sides of the family tried to coexist for my sake. Grandma Martha, 75F, barely said 2 words to Diane, while Grandpa Joe, 78M, spent most of the time outside, claiming he needed fresh air. High school brought its own set of challenges. Diane became increasingly possessive of my time, often scheduling activities or family outings that conflicted with my plans to see Mom. There was this science fair in junior year that Mom had been helping me prepare for. The night before, Diane insisted on reviewing my project and ended up changing half of it. I was furious but felt powerless to stop her. Despite these difficulties, I managed to maintain a strong relationship with Mom. We had our own traditions, like our annual camping trip every August or our Sunday morning breakfasts when I was home from college. These moments were my anchor, reminding me of the unconditional love and support I had in her. Fast forward to last year when I got engaged to my girlfriend, Emily, 27F. We've been together for 5 years, having met in our senior year of college. Emily has been my rock through all the family drama, offering a listening ear and unwavering support. When it came time to plan our wedding, I knew the guest list would be a delicate matter. After much deliberation, I decided to invite my dad but not Diane. It wasn't an easy choice, but I couldn't bear the thought of my mom having to watch the woman who broke up her marriage celebrate my special day. Plus, I was worried about how Diane might behave, given her history of trying to overshadow important moments in my life. I sat down with Dad and explained my decision. I told him that he was welcome to come, but he wouldn't be getting A+1. He seemed to understand, or at least I thought he did. He nodded, said he respected my choice, and promised to be there for my big day. The wedding day arrived, and everything was going smoothly. The ceremony was beautiful, and Emily looked stunning as she walked down the aisle. But as we were taking family photos after the ceremony, I spotted Diane walking in, arm in arm with my dad. My heart sank, and I felt a surge of anger. But I didn't want to cause a scene on my wedding day, so I gritted my teeth and tried to ignore her presence. That was a massive mistake. Throughout the reception, the tension was palpable. My mom's side of the family was visibly uncomfortable, avoiding Diane like the plague. I could see the hurt in my mom's eyes every time Diane loudly laughed or made a show of dancing with my dad. The breaking point came during my reception speech. I thanked my parents for their support, specifically mentioning how grateful I was to my dad for raising me and to my mom for her unwavering love and emotional support. I didn't mention Diane, and that set her off. She got completely wasted and started causing a scene. She called me an ungrateful brat, saying I should appreciate her for allowing me to live in her house. She went on and on about how she had been more of a mother to me than my real mom ever was. It was humiliating. Emily's family, the Thompsons, were horrified. They come from a very traditional, proper family, and they were appalled by Diane's behavior. Mr. Thompson, 60M, tried to intervene, but Diane just turned her vitriol on him. Mrs. Thompson, 58F, looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her up. For months after the wedding, the Thompsons treated me like I was some kind of ticking time bomb, just waiting to explode like Diane had. Every family dinner was filled with tense silence and wary glances. It took years of proving myself to finally convince them that I wasn't anything like her. Even now, 3 years later, I can still feel their unease sometimes. Now, fast forward to last month. I received a call from Dad's neighbor. Dad had suffered a massive heart attack and passed away in his sleep. The news hit me hard. Despite our complicated relationship, he was still my father, and I loved him. At the funeral, I saw Diane for the first time since my wedding. She looked older, more haggard. I avoided her as much as possible, still angry about how she had ruined one of the most important days of my life. Mom was there too, offering me comfort and support, just like she always had. A week after the funeral, as I was trying to process my grief and complicated feelings about Dad, Diane showed up at my house unannounced. I was tempted to slam the door in her face, but against my better judgment, I let her in. She started going through my stuff, touching everything like she owned the place. When I asked her what she wanted, she dropped a bombshell on me. Apparently, my dad had left her nothing but the house they lived in. He hadn't saved much money, and now Diane, who hadn't worked in years, was broke. And here's the kicker, she expected me to support her financially. She had the audacity to say that as the daughter she helped raise, it was my responsibility to take care of her. I was speechless. This woman, who had never been a real mother to me, who had embarrassed me at my wedding and caused years of tension with my in-laws, now wanted me to bankroll her lifestyle. I asked her if she ever felt sorry for what happened at my wedding. Her response? She said she had every right to be there and that I should have realized my mistake in not inviting her. That was the last straw. I kicked her out of my house and told her never to show her face again. I don't care how she survives now. She made her bed, and now she can lie in it. Am I wrong for refusing to help her? Should I feel guilty about leaving her to fend for herself? I just can't bring myself to help someone who has caused me so much pain and never shown an ounce of remorse. Update 1. It's been about 2 weeks since I last posted, and unfortunately, things have only gotten more complicated. Diane has been relentless in her attempts to contact me. She's been calling and texting nonstop, even after I blocked her number. Somehow, she's been getting information about my family, including my husband's phone number. Last night, she crossed a line. She called my husband, Alex, 29M, on his cell phone. I hadn't told Alex about Diane's request for financial support because I didn't want to drag him into this mess, especially after everything he went through with his family because of her behavior at our wedding. When Alex told me about the call, I had to come clean about everything. He was furious, not at me, but at Diane. He said I should have called the cops and filed a harassment complaint against her. I didn't realize it had gotten to that point, but looking back at the sheer number of blocked calls and texts, I can see he's right. Alex pointed out that all those blocked calls and texts would serve as proof if we decided to file a complaint. So, tomorrow, we're going to the police station to do just that. I'm nervous about taking this step, but I know it's necessary to protect our peace of mind. As I prepare to take this drastic step, I can't help but reflect on my history with Diane. There was this one time when I was about 12, and I had a big school play coming up. I was cast as the lead in our school's production of The Wizard of Oz, and I was over the moon excited. My mom had promised to help me with my costume, and we had planned a whole weekend of working on it together. We were going to make a simple but effective Dorothy costume, complete with ruby slippers we'd make by gluing red sequins onto an old pair of shoes. But then Diane found out and insisted on taking over. She went overboard, spending way too much money on materials and trying to make this elaborate costume that wasn't even right for the character. She ordered this custom-made dress from a specialty shop and bought real ruby-encrusted shoes that cost more than my dad's monthly car payment. I remember crying to my dad, begging him to let me use the simpler costume my mom and I had planned. But he just shrugged and said, "Diane worked really hard on this. You don't want to hurt her feelings, do you?" In the end, I wore what Diane made, and I felt uncomfortable and out of place on stage. The dress was too fancy for the small-town Kansas setting of the play, and I could barely walk in those expensive shoes. My drama teacher pulled me aside after the performance and gently suggested that I try to find a more appropriate costume for the next night's show. I ended up wearing a hastily put-together outfit that my mom and I threw together in one evening, and it worked so much better. That's just one example of how Diane always tried to overshadow my relationship with my mom. She was constantly trying to one-up her, buying me expensive gifts or planning extravagant outings. But what she never understood was that those material things couldn't replace the genuine love and connection I had with my mom. There was another incident when I was 16. I had been saving up for months to buy a used car. I worked part-time at the local grocery store, mowed lawns, and even sold some of my old video games. I was so close to my goal when Diane swooped in and bought me a brand new car for my birthday. On the surface, it seemed like an incredibly generous gift. But I knew it came with strings attached. She expected me to be grateful, to choose her over my mom, to see her as my real mother because she could provide things my mom couldn't. But what Diane never understood was that my mom had given me something far more valuable than any car or costume. She had given me unconditional love and support. She taught me the value of hard work and saving for what you want. She showed me that love isn't about material possessions, but about being there for someone, listening to them, supporting their dreams. Now, as an adult, I can see that Diane's behavior stems from her own insecurities. She always saw me as a threat to her relationship with my dad, so she tried to buy my affection. And now that dad is gone and she's left with nothing, she's trying to guilt me into taking care of her. But I refuse to let her manipulate me anymore. I've worked hard to build a life for myself, to heal from the trauma of my parents' divorce and the years of tension that followed. I'm not going to let Diane's desperation derail everything I've accomplished. I'm anxious about what will happen when we file the police report tomorrow. Part of me feels guilty, like I'm betraying my dad's memory by taking such drastic action against his wife. But then I remind myself of how he let her treat me, how he never stood up for me or set boundaries with her. Maybe if he had, we wouldn't be in this situation now. As I prepare for tomorrow, I find myself thinking about my mom. I haven't told her about what's been happening with Diane. I know she'd support me, but I also know it would bring up a lot of painful memories for her. Maybe after we file the report, I'll give her a call. It might be time to have a long talk about everything that's happened. I'll update again after we've been to the police station. Wish me luck. Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and I wanted to fill you all in on what's happened since then. We did end up filing a police report against Diane for harassment. The cops gave her a warning and fined her, but let her off relatively easy since nothing major had happened yet. For a while, it seemed like the warning had worked. Things were quiet for about a month, and I started to feel like I could breathe again. I even managed to have a nice, long talk with my mom about everything that had been going on. She was supportive, as always, and helped me work through some of the guilt I'd been feeling about taking legal action against Diane. But of course, the peace couldn't last. Yesterday, Diane showed up at my doorstep again. She looked terrible, haggard, with dark circles under her eyes and clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in days. For a split second, I felt a pang of sympathy. But then I remembered everything she's put me through, and I steeled myself. I told her to leave before I called the cops again, but she wouldn't budge. She started begging me for money, saying she was broke and needed cash just to buy food. She promised it would be just this once until she found a job. But I've heard that kind of promise before. When I was in college, Diane convinced my dad to cut off my allowance, saying I needed to learn financial independence. Then, she started offering me money herself, always with strings attached. If I wanted cash for books, I had to spend the weekend helping her with house projects. If I needed money for a school trip, I had to listen to her badmouth my mom for hours. I remember one particularly painful incident during my sophomore year of college. I had been selected for a study abroad program in Spain, something I'd been dreaming about for years. But it was expensive, and even with scholarships, I was going to need help to make it happen. I worked up the courage to ask my dad for help, but before I could even finish explaining, Diane jumped in. She said they'd be happy to help, but on one condition: I had to agree to spend the entire summer with them instead of splitting my time between their house and my mom's like I usually did. I was torn. The program was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but the thought of not seeing my mom for an entire summer was heartbreaking. In the end, I turned down their offer and the program. I spent that summer working 2 jobs to save up for the next year's study abroad opportunity. It was hard, but mom was there for me every step of the way, even picking up extra shifts at the diner where she worked to help out. Remembering all of this, I refused to fall into Diane's trap again. I called the cops, and they took her away. I hope this time the message sticks. I've been thinking a lot about my dad since all this started. I remember when I was about 16, and I overheard him and Diane arguing about money. Dad had wanted to start a college fund for me, but Diane insisted they needed the money for a kitchen remodel instead. Dad gave in, like he always did. Now I wonder if that's why he didn't leave her any money. Maybe in his final years, he realized how she'd been manipulating our family's finances all along. Or maybe he just spent everything trying to make her happy. Either way, her financial problems are not my responsibility. Alex has been incredibly supportive through all of this. He's helped me set up security cameras around our house, just in case Diane tries to show up again when we're not home. We're also in the process of filing for a restraining order. The paperwork should be finalized any day now. As we wait for the restraining order to be processed, I find myself reflecting on the positive changes in my life. Alex and I have been talking about starting a family of our own soon. The thought of becoming a parent myself has made me even more determined to break the cycle of dysfunction that defined my childhood. I want to create a home filled with love, trust, and respect, all the things that were missing from my relationship with Diane. I want my future children to know that they are loved unconditionally, not because of what they can do or what they can provide, but simply because they exist. I'll update again if anything significant happens, but hopefully, this will be the end of it. I'm ready to move on with my life and focus on my own family, the one I've chosen, not the one that was forced upon me. Update 3, I've got some news to share, and I'm still processing how I feel about it all. Yesterday, I received a call from the police station. Apparently, someone paid Diane's bail and she's been released. The officer couldn't tell me who paid it, but I have my suspicions. You see, a few days ago, I ran into my old neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, 70F, at the grocery store. She used to live next door to my dad and Diane, and she always had a soft spot for Diane. Mrs. Johnson asked me how Diane was doing, and I gave her a vague answer about not being in touch. I should have known better. Mrs. Johnson has always been a kind-hearted person, but she never really knew the full story of our family dynamics. I remember when I was about 14, and Diane had one of her episodes where she drank too much and started yelling at me for not appreciating her enough. Mrs. Johnson came over, concerned about the noise, and Diane smoothly turned on the charm, explaining away her behavior as just a little family disagreement. Mrs. Johnson bought it hook, line, and sinker, and even baked us cookies the next day to help smooth things over. I'm worried that Mrs. Johnson might have bailed Diane out, and worse, that she might be enabling her behavior. The thought of Diane manipulating another kind-hearted person makes my blood boil. It's like history repeating itself, and I feel helpless to stop it. On a more positive note, our restraining order against Diane has been approved. It's a relief to have that legal protection in place, but I can't help feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me is sad that it had to come to this, that my relationship with my stepmom has deteriorated to the point where I need legal intervention to keep her away. But then I remind myself of all the times Diane crossed the line. Like when she accidentally spilled wine on my mom's dress at my high school graduation. I can still see the look of hurt and embarrassment on my mom's face as she tried to clean the red stain off her pale blue dress in the bathroom. Or when she tried to convince my college girlfriend that I was cheating on her, just because Diane didn't approve of our relationship. It took weeks to repair the damage that caused, and even though my girlfriend and I eventually broke up for other reasons, I never forgot how Diane almost destroyed something good in my life out of pure spite. I've realized that Diane has always been toxic, and keeping her out of my life is the healthiest decision I can make. Alex and I are talking about starting a family of our own soon, and I want to break the cycle of dysfunction that defined my childhood. I'm determined to be a better parent than my dad was. I want to create a home where our children feel safe, loved, and respected. Where they don't have to walk on eggshells or worry about saying the wrong thing. Where they know that our love for them is unconditional and not dependent on how well they perform or how much they can do for us. As I close this chapter of my life, I'm focusing on the future. I'm grateful for the support I've received from all of you throughout this journey. Your comments and advice have been a source of strength and clarity. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I'm stronger now than I've ever been. Whatever challenges come my way, I'm ready to face them head on, with Alex by my side and without the toxic influence of my past weighing me down. I've scheduled a lunch with my mom next week. I want to thank her for everything she's done for me, for being the constant source of love and support in my life. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to start talking about the possibility of her becoming a grandmother. The thought of seeing her face light up at that news gives me hope for the future. Thank you all for listening and for your support. Here's to new beginnings and healthier relationships.